Thank you to our panel today. The focus today is on Auburn, and it's such a pleasure to have you all here. So just to introduce the panelists, we have Eric Bost, who is chef owner of Auburn and has a tremendous career of working internationally and background in French cuisine, and spent many years in Paris and in all kinds of other places. And he'll be talking about all of that as we go through our discussion. Delphine Lipens is the owner of Humble Ceramics, and she founded the company in 2014 and has been making ceramics for restaurants all over LA and far beyond as well, and hospitality projects over these years in her space in South LA. And John and Masha are from Klein Agency, and they design both spaces and objects, and we'll be talking about how you both met and your background as we go through. So I think the best starting point is with you, Eric, and your ideas for the restaurant, and what was your vision in terms of what you wanted in the restaurant, both with food and design?
Sure. So I think from a high level perspective, the context of coming out of working for 8 years with a 3 Michelin star chef based in France or in Paris. So he has 4 restaurants there. His name is Guy Savoy. So for me to try and highlight and use that voice of elegant, refined, product-driven cooking, but also look at how we could strip away the rules that you would typically find with fine dining. So really the attempt is to cook thoughtful food, cook delicious food, make a unique experience, and do something that's humble. That's really about something that's not precious, that's approachable. And so I developed this kind of menu format that really did remove the rules, put the customer in the driving seat, but allowed us as a restaurant to still curate an interesting evening, to still do a tasting format menu so we can cook more focused and edited plates. And so I was trying to find this bridge. How do we make it, again, understandable, understated, elegant, humble, approachable, warm, generous, and welcoming. And that was the key, because I feel like there's a lot of stress that comes along with going to a fine dining restaurant. Typically you have $300, $400 check averages. They could be celebratory restaurants. Yeah, everyone has to find their own voice, right? But for me, it was really putting the customer first and saying, if we can get people in, build something interesting, make it approachable, then that was a better way to go. Not better, different way to go.
So for all of you, how did you understand this idea of Auburn to be, and what did you want to convey in terms of the space and the objects within it? And that's for all 3 of you, question.
I think from the very beginning, Eric's voice was incredibly strong in this vision, and his attention towards and kind of fascination towards everything that the guest would experience when coming to his restaurant. So that was the I think the largest driver in the beginning was, what is that guest when they come to the restaurant, that what is the first touch point they're going to have? What are they going to feel when they sit down in their chair? They're going to feel the arm of the chair. They're going to see the exterior. They're going to look at the plants. They're going to make associations immediately before they even have a first bite or first drink with the space that they're in. So the whole picture had to be taken into consideration from the beginning, not just from the kitchen forward.
For us, it was mind-boggling to figure out how we met a person that actually fully sees eye to eye, because in a sense, we make our own furniture so that we can push these things, so that we can focus on tactile and on materials and how they engage and how to keep it clean and minimal and how to keep integrity of the pieces. And there we met a client who was all of a sudden all on board to create a whole space that would read the same way, because it was all about keeping every single touch and feel and smell and fresh air and all of these things became important where oftentimes when you are in situations where you're designing spaces for clients, you know, this is the budget and this is the vision, and then you gotta kind of make the reality. So it was incredible to be able to be kind of concocting this design together with a chef that had such strong idea of what the space, how the space should make you feel as a guest.
I kind of feel I'm blocking the pictures because it's so important to have something to relate to. It's okay. You can hear me. No, but it's important because you can see the integration of the space, the mood, the textures, the colors, and that's what we're talking about. So I wanted you guys to kind of piece it together before we continue.
And also we should point out that objects from the restaurant are, in this case,
That's the girl shop.
in the case next to you, and this bar stool, elevated stool in leather on the wall is also one of the designs for the restaurant. But so Delphine, do you want to add to that as far as what you make fit in with the aesthetic of the restaurant?
You know, for me it was a very different experience because I didn't know anything about the restaurant. Even the name I didn't know. But I got to know Eric, and I knew instantly when he was talking about, you know, John and Masa, the type of space that it would be, and the fact that he was drawn to our work. I knew he was resonating with the raw materials, but also his personality speaks louder than words, and I knew he was a poet and sensitive sensitive to the materials, and I don't know, I guess it was more of a gut feeling, but I didn't see it come together until the very, very end. I could only judge based on the pieces that he chose, but I didn't know how he would use them, in what context, and I didn't know it would come out this beautiful. So, yeah.
One of the aspects of this show, and certainly your project, your restaurant, that I think is so become more common and very recently, is this personal connection that you're talking about. All of you are connected. This isn't just a business transaction. This is about what each of you make comes together to form this restaurant. I wonder if you have thoughts about that.
Yeah, I mean, the restaurant is the way it is because this was a design-build process, right? So it was always important to get people who were extremely motivated and passionate and adept with their skill set and put them in the same room in the end, even if we weren't all together and all those components weren't necessarily in the same conversations from the beginning. I felt like the vision was fairly clear of how it should come across. But it's absolutely a result of a lot of work and design and redesign and pushing back and forth and putting things together, a sense of demolition and discovery of the space. We knew we had a building that had a very important place in Los Angeles dining scene that was, you know, Citrus by Michel Richard in the late 80s. Most recently, Hatfields, all very, very well-known chefs and individuals in LA. So the idea of having a historic building, even in that sense, we wanted to open the restaurant to feel that it was a continuation of a story. So if we need to open something that already feels that it existed before, then we have to have, like, I think the material palette has to be there, the substantial aspects of the thickness that was used. I mean, everyone here has done an amazing job at what they do when, like, all these things have come together for what we have. So the intention was there to build something, and how it became was like the hard work of everyone digging in. No?
How much nitty-gritty specs, you know, materials, did you have those ideas in mind, or did you, you know, when you approached Klein, for instance, You know, what?
Well, I came with the first conversation we had was more, this is the idea, and they didn't really know the food, and we just had the menu format, and it was more, again, the idea, like a conversation of this is how we want guests to feel, this is how we want the restaurant to operate, how we want it to be unique and not feel like it is another restaurant here, and try and make sure it finds its own voice, knowing that the restaurant should be built for a 20-year lifespan or a 30-year lifespan. This is not like a 2-year restaurant that we then flip into something else. And we knew that as we opened it, it was not going to be at 100%. This is like a process, right? So we're learning as we go. We're learning as the first seasons we cook through, the first year we cook through, and making sure that we're defining the restaurant by our actions. And that was sort of how we started the conversation. They put in like these ties into European perspective, your studio in Antwerp, the work they did in Europe, simple material palette, like clean lines just came together. They put this packet that blew me and my wife away within like a 3-day time frame.
We thought he was mad that he was even considering working with us. We had such huge respect for what he's done. And I would say that we felt like immediately in his brief, we felt like, oh my God, this person really does, we see eye to eye. And especially what Eric is saying about, he is going to live into this space. Like his food changes per what's seasonally there. So we wanted to have that element be part of the space too. So not only the greenery grows and changes and gives, it's slightly different every season and grows bigger 3 years from now, but it was also about everything that's built is built out of real materials. So it's integral oak. His beautiful doors are made out of integral 3x3 inch frames. You touch it, you feel it, and it's only going to go better. And it's going to, the oak tables are going to slowly, the human hand will penetrate them and kind of, will change that beautiful, pristine nature of the piece with time. The leather that was chosen is naked, so with time it'll wear into something different. It was a lot of these things that he and he's able to communicate through his cuisine. We were trying to find the right ways to express them in the space.
No veneers?
No veneers. We had such long conversations. This building industry here is monstrous. Everything goes so fast. Everybody thinks they know how they, like everything is built the same way, or in a sense, if you want to do it quick and dirty. And we were a little stumped by it initially. We had meetings where we were like being told that building with real wood is not a thing. And we were like, wait, but what do you mean? We built like that for centuries. We built a whole building in it. Why do you think we cannot build, the thing that the customer will actually touch? Why do you think that cannot be contaminated by the human hand? So I think it was this push back with everything that, but at the same time, we were also like, we gotta be smart enough to bring this to completion and to make sure that, this doesn't implode on itself. So it was, like Eric's saying, it was a lot of work on the whole team was kind of chugging through this monster of a project too.
Yeah, I think to add just to what you said, in our industry, in architecture and in design, you often are trapped on a page, you're in a computer. And I think that it's so crucial, and it was our intention from the get-go is to introduce materiality from the beginning, so that you're touching and you're feeling and you're getting out from beneath the screen. And visualization for our studio is extremely important. We visualize and we design through an image, so through the ability to be able to map textures and map those materials into a vision of what will be there, and we try to get as haptic as we can with those images, so that we introduce light from the beginning, because light is, ultimately we can spend days and weeks in the 2D page, but until you introduce light into a space is only when you really understand what it's doing. And I think and how how that palette is coming together and forming something that the guest is going to come in and perceive. So I think from our standpoint, from a design standpoint, I think that having the materiality first in hand and having an understanding of how simple things can be put together, not make it complex. Don't go through a massive process of CNCing MDF to then glue on a 1mm veneer and then have all these joints. And a lot of the shops in LA and across the world are tooled that way. Everybody has tooled their shops to produce projects of that type. And in a sense, you see that a lot. I mean, you see the propagation of that kind of style throughout the city, throughout the country, and things start to look the same. And I think this project was a bit of a kickback to that, to try to figure out a way to make it like bring it back to its elements again, which I think is reflected in Eric's cooking as well. Is that, you know, it's very ingredient driven. It's very lay it out there raw, let it be there, let it age with time. You know, in our case. Hopefully not too much time in his case. And you know, yeah. So I think that idea of materiality was very strong from the beginning.
Delphine, do you want to add to that?
Well, I mean, I feel Eric was kind of like the conductor, how he pulled all of us and all the materials together. He had the vision before we had it. I think it was his passion that inspired us. And I'm intrigued at the solidity of the materials. Everything is very rustic. It's very well designed. They're very simple shapes, but they're very dense. But it's also about the beauty of the raw material, which, being from Belgium, I really resonate with. But yeah.
Yeah, well, all of you synthesize the European plus American tradition. So I think that's interesting, an aspect that definitely comes through in the restaurant. So I wonder, as far as the tactile aspects of what you're all making for the restaurant, and you know what your intention was for the customer's experience, but how, when you're making these objects, that influenced what you all wanted to do, or how you wanted people to feel on a tactile level.
I mean, I think try to make things simple and let the materials resonate is hard. You know, I think it's a battle to make things in physical. You know, I think that's the big lesson that we learn every day in our studio, is that just to produce something, it's an incredibly difficult and rewarding experience. And so I think, you know, for example, with the bar stool, you know, we wanted to figure out a way to engineer it using hardware that wasn't off the shelf, that we couldn't, you know, go down to Home Depot and grab and put together, but something that was, you know, we figured out a mechanism to clasp the leather in a way that, you know, we'd feel safe with, you know, the hundreds of people that were going to sit on it, you know, through the years now, and to let that skin. We tend to treat our design in a way that we think about it. I remember one thing that we heard very early on in our studio was someone wrote an article about John Coltrane's music, and they said that they described it as sheets of sound. And I always thought that was beautiful, because when you listen to him and you listen to his records, you hear that he's playing it in a different way. You know, like people hadn't played the horn like that until he came around, and you heard that his harmonics, like the way that he would produce those sheets of sound, and that always resonates with us in terms of how do you show architecture or design or materiality is in terms of that raw flatness in a way, you know, and I feel like the bar stool for us was a real clean example of letting that leather really, you know, speak to what its job is, and then let the framework control it.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of it, we started talking about this haptic bend that happens in this restaurant. We trapped it by the two kind of scored in shadow gaps, but it is this kind of 8 feet of vertical space that we said this is what should be dense, and what everything that lands there should be there for a reason. Nothing that's kind of is there for the sake of decoration does not need to be there. Let the food, let the vegetation, let the air be the decoration, let the people be the decoration. So we kind of pulled back, but what we tried to pack in was everything that was somewhat on it, like that was honest, that we knew that we didn't only know how it was built, but that we knew who was being built by. So, I mean, at the end of it, like really, when you look at this space, it's pretty much everything's been built in like a radius of, 10, 15 miles around the restaurant. We kind of pushed all the artisans that we knew in our kind of furniture network to land and enter where we could.
It was a project of like a lot of kickbacks with like pushbacks. Yeah, not kickbacks. A lot of kickbacks, no. A lot of pushbacks. I mean, when I look at these images, I see the vegetation in the courtyard, and when you go there today, it's unbelievable.
Wild.
I mean, it's completely wild, and that was the intention. You know, we got a lot of pushback to say you shouldn't plant your plants that close. You should. These won't survive. They're not meant for this area and this narrative. But we said let's just go for it. Let's do something a bit unusual, a bit wild. And Eric was the biggest proponent of that sort of ideology. And so you get these moments where like just things the nature is uncontrollable. It's really taking over in the space. And I hope that you know each visitor feels that.
You know what I love about the space is you walk in, it is the smells. You smell the wood, you smell the sisal, you smell the leather, and you smell the kitchen. So there's nothing toxic, and so it's so welcoming. It's rustic and elegant at the same time, but it's not pretentious. You're not intimidated. You feel welcome. It's warm. But already all these smells that you would smell, I mean, my grandmother, you know, every time I'd go to her house, I was always smelling. You know, I would smell the wall. I would smell the plate. I would smell, I don't care. I'm intrigued. What are my senses? And so in this particular space, I don't think I've ever been into a restaurant where you could actually smell the leather, you know, and the wood. Every wood has a different smell and how it interacts. Like, yeah, so I you know, I'm a fan.
I'm glad we bought that candle.
Well, that's a great point. I mean, a restaurant is this multi-sensory experience, and with their involvement, it really becomes that even more. So, yeah, I mean, how do you feel? The smells change everything.
Sure. It does. And we needed a space that changes throughout the seasons. So again, like John was saying, light was one of the most important directives from the beginning. Get as much natural light into the space as we could. Mm-hmm. And it went through a lot of effort to, I mean, for example, during the demo process, we found some clear story windows in the old private dining room, just because we were ripping down the wood framing on the top. And the light coming through the beams cast this beautiful shadow on the ground. And it was just this moment of, we increased the height in the room, we opened it up, it was more light, and there was this interactive play between the shadows, and how that would evolve throughout the day was super important. So the short of it, we had to tear down half the building to rebuild it, and we couldn't have clear story windows because of waterproofing, so we put in skylights. But the existing beams are still there from before. So again, to kind of pay homage to the existing building, but also try and put a modern approach on it, and also or just a new skin and a new breath of fresh air, was to sort of capture that moment, right? So that's when you walk into the building, this bar scene with all these beautiful shadows on the floor. Yeah, and then so all this, you know, it was kind of up in here in this section. And then as you walk through, you kind of compressed into the center room. I mean, it was kind of one of the ideas from the beginning was this collection of rooms. And a home is a collection of rooms, right? And you don't furnish a home all in one shot and buy everything at once. And so a home is something that is personal because of what you get throughout your life, and you bring in the space. And so that was important. And like when we started talking about a chair, it was not one chair, it wasn't two chairs, it was how do we get 5 or 6 chairs in the building? But how do they speak to each other? And they have to be cohesive and speak the same language, but shouldn't feel programmed, and it shouldn't feel cut and paste, because then it's industrial, it's a big impersonal model, it's a huge factory. That was never the intention. And so these minor variances, John and Masha were great at, because it was, I don't want the simple thing. We don't want the easy road. It was like, let's design this and then turn it and change it, so it still speaks the same language.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of it, like before, I would say, you know, like now I'm trying to pull them back out of our wood shop, but like there's, you know, close to a dozen prototypes of the chairs that landed. And then when we were looking through the model just recently, there was close to 100 of iterations that we initially looked at and turned around. And, you know, like what we initially felt was like, oh, this is killer. Like we're totally doing this was, you know, nixed halfway down because some other things changed and came into play. So.
The scale is very small. I mean, when you get down to the numbers, it's, you know, all the chairs in the restaurant were produced by probably 4 people.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a really small scale.
Yeah.
How many is it total? How many does it seat?
I mean,
Oh, sorry, 104 seats.
Okay.
So,
did we get that? Did we make that?
Well, I mean, because banquettes, that's why I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, some of the
76 chairs
banquets.
and-
We've got 75 in the dining room and then 30 in the bar. And between the 75 dining room, there's 30 inside and 35 outside, or 35, somewhere in this range. Small private dining room, which capitalizes on the same sort of natural light. And again, it's this kind of design build process. It's always an adaptation to existing. Like we went with a design to the city and the city said, we didn't know this part of the building existed. So we then threw everything kind of in the trash and restarted from zero about 6 months in.
Wow.
And we're super fortunate. I mean, I think it's far beyond what we were initially expecting the building could be. And the challenge of how do we bring light into that existing space just went away. And we were I feel like it's kind of like writer's block. We just kept throwing these ideas of how do we get light in, and it would never stick. It never felt good until we had a clean slate. And when we had a clean slate, John and Masha came up with 2 or 3 different variants of ways we could approach it and then what could make sense. And so it was a lot of discussion, and then how does that tie into the dining scenario? Because it is a business in the end, and we have to look at operational efficiencies, and we have to look at how do we put china glass and silver close to the servers and the captains so that they don't have to leave their positions, so that the guest knows exactly who's taking control. So a lot of the design elements were also dictated by the business model and how our service model was, so that the team could be as close to the guests as possible.
Yeah, that was one of my next questions, is kind of all the practical aspects, which is very different for a restaurant project than a domestic, residential project. So in some of our past talks, we've talked about even down to seat design and how comfortable they are and how long you want somebody in that chair. So can you all kind of talk about what, the real hard, the weight of a plate that, if a waiter is carrying multiple plates at a certain point in time,
They deal with it.
Completely ignored.
No, that was completely ignored. But it's the truth, because our team has to adapt to the customers and the scenario. So that was absolutely never even in the question. And some of these plates are I don't know, some of the big ones are super, super heavy. But in order for us to present that material and put that object in front, this is something that we have to do. And the menu format, there's so many unknowns that we designed the kitchen to deal with the way people would order, but there was unknowns of it's not the proven formula of how we design the kitchen, which then ties into the same thing that we have to adapt as operators. If we want to release control, take risk, and allow the guests the most kind of liberty in this dining experience, then we have to do whatever we have to adapt.
But what's interesting about for example, the ceramics being so heavy, it brings you into the moment, into the now. You're conscious of your body mechanics. So you have to pay attention of how you hold yourself, how you're holding yourself, how much you can handle, and so you're really present in the moment. Not that it's great for waiters, and they probably hate me, but you are more mindful of how you're handling the dishes. Also, this is not, double glazed porcelain, so you have to be more mindful how you handle it, how you stack it, how you wash it. But that heft is part of the beauty of the piece, and it fits energetically with the thickness of the wood, which is solid. If you're eating out of an object made of stone, stone is heavy. And I think, so that's...
And some of the bowls are left unsanded on the outside intentionally to have a guest feel the grip as well.
And you use both sides, which is really cool.
How about in terms of seating, which, is so key?
But they are comfortable.
But, it changes people's posture and really...
Yeah, it sure does. I mean, like I said, I can't say it enough. Eric is just by far the best. I'm longing for the next client who can be like him, in all honesty. Because it pushed us. We had our own furniture line, which we are constantly turning and adding things into, but it's a constant battle between what's architecturally pleasing or where you're trying to get to, how you're trying to engage materials, and then how that makes a person feel when it actually sits and uses it. So I think the fact that he constantly was pushing us, we had this, the backs and the chairs are all hand carved by our woodsmen, and there was multiple iterations where it was like, this is perfect, but how about like extra 3% that, we could lean back. So it was a lot of like, how do you communicate that back to a craftsman that really, it worked well, but it also took quite a bit of time. Same with like our laser cut steel chairs. I mean, this bar stool has a lounge version of it. And he was so on point, like I said in it in one of iterations, I was like, this is perfect, we nailed it, like, good job. And then comes Eric and he's like, I don't know, like if I would be like 3 inches taller, imagine like this would really push me too far. So it was a lot of this back and forth of where do we really need to be and how like we honed and honed and honed to just get it right. And I think it was a great exercise for us. We loved the process. We loved having someone be that engaged. It resulted in all the pieces that landed. We're super proud of now. They're part of our collection, but it was a lot about let's make sure that everybody, not just me, feels comfortable in all of the pieces that they're experiencing. So it was less about, let's make sure we can kick them out in an hour because they're going to be uncomfortable. It was more about let's make sure they really like that everything feels right.
And the chairs tie into the table, so the height of the table is important next to the seat of the chair. Looking at averages.
We came up with this ingenious idea about the linen sticking to the table. I mean, it was a whole
genius.
He came to us and was like, we were like, so is this a white table service? Are you like super fine dining? Are you not? Like, what are we gonna be doing? He had this idea about how this almost like resonating Japanese, having tablecloth on a table, but kind of not engaging with it too much. So your feet, your hands don't really like have to deal with, parting it to sit properly or whatever, and an ability to quickly swap it. So we ended up going back and forth with a bunch of ideas, and we routed in magnets on the bottom of all the solid pieces, so that there's a tiny little steel profile stick that threads into this custom linens that can pop in and kind of magnetically attach to it. So it's relatively easy for the service to quickly pull it off, change it out, bring a new one, but it also just looks nice and crisp and clean, and that was fun.
I mean, the whole dinner, I was trying to figure out, okay, what's the mechanism underneath? This is kind of cool, because usually you have these claps, or clamps? No, whatever you...
Yeah, okay. We would not be using those.
No, it was really, really cool.
Yeah, and that aspect is such an interesting, seems like back to your kind of fine French dining tradition of the white tablecloth, this is totally the antithesis in most ways.
Well, you take the best of the point of tablecloth can be, there's a couple of different things. It's luxurious. It puts another tactical component that's soft in front of someone. And for me, but it was a very clear idea of if we want to make fine dining not heavy anymore and not draping and not codified and not so strict, it was a very easy. It was a very clear message to say, okay, well, let's not have the linen drape. How do we make it tuck under? And so that's a clean aesthetic, but it was always about valuing the wood at its core as well. So we needed a table that lived on its own, first of all. And then we had to figure out, we wanted to leave an inch to an inch and a half border around the outside. So it wasn't a runner and it wasn't a tablecloth. And this clean line it took time to develop how that integration actually worked. But it feels like the project is extremely cohesive because of that. Because every time we come up with an idea, they were able to take that idea and figure out how to make it work. So I needed a hearth to cook on. So we needed someone to make a steel hearth, and these you just don't find them anywhere. So John designed it. We found a similar system and sort of looked at that as a benchmark. Okay, how can we construct this? And this is the way the weight is carried. And
I'm sorry, what is a hearth?
A hearth is basically like a fireplace. So it's a means for us to cook on wood.
Ah, okay.
But in order to make it flexible for us, because we wanted something we could cook directly on wood, we could grill, we could smoke, we could dry, we could have tons of different variants. I needed a system of shelving to move from proximity to the flame, but also a way to hang things. And by looking at like one other place or two other places that have been able to do it successfully, John like drew the model, built it 3D, and then looked at the team who did the bar stools and were able to cut it, weld it, and install it. So basically we've come in with all these ideas and challenges, and they would just make it happen.
Yeah, it was a pretty interesting process because, you know, he had the brief of what it needed to do, and we looked at some images of some other systems that have how it worked. But then we wanted to figure it out in a way that we work with a laser cutter, that we are able to use sheets of steel that we laser cut 2D profiles, and then we're able to notch it together in a way to form like 3D space frames that you know, he would have the functionality that he needed. So we were able to basically do the whole functional final model with just running iterations in a digital model and then producing the final form, and fingers crossed that it worked.
And it did. It's better, I think, than the systems that exist. Just because the weight is cantilevered, it's like more stable, honestly.
can
It ends up
mass
super,
produce it.
super well. No, it did. I mean, it's interesting.
Auburn.
Well,
The auburn logo.
It's become an aspect of restaurant design to have like elevated seating, bar stools have become so much more common just very recently. What's your, take? It's such a different way of experiencing restaurant.
So we try and look at the other perspective of almost everything when we're approaching something. So so we want the dining room to be deformalized more or less. So there is a like half-inch lower table with a slightly more elevated seat profile than normal. The bar needed to be the inverse. So where you would typically go to the bar, you would eat on the bar with the team working on the same level. I really wanted to try and have a separation between the guest experience and what the team was doing. So all the while knowing that you're still in the same space, it's shared, that there's energy because of movement of bottles, and you're seeing product, and you're seeing like this, the concoction of all the cocktails and wine and everything being served. But at the same time, I didn't want that. I wanted like a personal space, and you needed to detach the plate and what you're eating from the work that's being done. And so we looked at a couple of different ways, right? But this sort of 6-inch backsplash that kind of runs the entire bar was a way to separate and basically be able to focus the view on what was going on the plate, because we do 9-course tasting menus at the bar a lot. We also do an a la carte bar, which is the only place that's a la carte right now. So it needs to be varied. But again, it was like trying to elevate a bar so it could manage a tasting menu at a pretty high check average, but also like make it feel approachable and interject like a bar. We didn't want to go too far out of people's comfort zone.
Yeah, I still
But
go
so the
and
bar
like,
stools, yeah.
have drinks with my friends standing up at the bar because I love it. It's like it has multitude of ways of how you as a guest can experience it. But I think generally also like that whole entry and the bar, the way they grounds that space. There used to be like a dentist's office. For us, it was about like, there's light, there's clarity, and then there's this piece here. And everything else kind of has to kind of disappear and be a little calm around it. So I think why the bar also resonates and feels so good is that there's so much space there. And it's grounded on both sides. It's 8 by 8 feet large windows. So there's like the light hits you. There's your giant entry window pivot door. So it's this like space that in the night, the light is all the like buzzing, all the lights that are happening around, but you're inside this kind of like wooden, beautiful home type of feel. And you have space, you have air. Like you're able to sit and then kind of stand around and walk around and not feel like everything is like super dense or you're like pushed in a certain way. I like that. The way the space feels now when it's in use and when there's people, and it feels really good.
I mean, it's almost as if the art is living. So the light is a living art, and the plants are the living art. Many restaurants have art on the walls, or they'll have sculptures and objects. Here, it's really the light.
And the people, I think. It is the light, the vegetation, and the people and the color.
Mm-hmm.
And that was intentional, not to hang things on the wall outside the private dining room, I think.
And I think it's generally like for people in our industry of kind of architecture and interior design, especially when it comes to commercial spaces here, it's tough. Like there's so many manufacturers out there that do amazing work, and that, you know, you want to plaster them all over. You know, like look at this new beautiful tile line. Look at this new beautiful paint way. Look at this, like, you know, crazy base. Look at what you can put on a floor. It's like there's just so many things you could just do. That for us, it was about creating a space that kind of gives a customer a little breather from it all, so you don't feel like you're kind of like oppressed by the newest and coolest materials that are out there, but you're more like free to kind of re-engage, reset, be calm, which is, I think, something that maybe, I don't know, maybe it's just us, but like you're searching for it, like especially in spaces in these busy cities, like you're searching for areas and spaces that are calmer, that don't like oppress you with everything that you have to engage with. And I think Auburn does that successfully.
We're gonna add something?
No, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's such a perfect symbol for this day and age, and what people want and need is that serenity. So it definitely conveys that in the space. Last question, then I'll open up for everyone else to ask questions. But what excites you all the most about the LA restaurant world in terms of both this food and design? And Auburn is obviously at the forefront of all of that. So ideas about, you know, what you see happening and what you think is exciting about.
Oh my God, where to start? Everything is possible here. I mean, you have all the cultures, all the different aesthetics, all the traditions, all the, you know, it's insane, the combination. It's just like mathematics. It's an endless, I mean, you can get almost dizzy because everybody puts their own spin on it, and there's the fusion of it and the design, and people are much more aware these days of you know, restaurants are an extension of their personalities. You walk into a restaurant and you instantly know the group that designed it, or you can feel the energy, whether it's, you know, whether it's too busy or too intellectual, or whether it's, you can relax in a space like this. Oh, okay. So, yeah, I mean, that's just, I love the diversity.
I think, I mean, for us coming from Europe, it's the pace of the city, the way things, how quickly things can come to life. It's incredible. Not just in a sense of the, you know, construction industry is kind of overheating and just there for you to chug through. That the money's here to support ideas. Like, it's just something that we haven't experienced before. It's a little intense. Like, it's a little kind of, you're trapped in it and you're a little like, my gosh, where's all of this supposed to be going to? But it's a giant city, you know, it's supposed to be going to all these people out there that, you know, are eager to explore new routes and new realms. It's, it's absolutely the most amazing city that we've been to in regards to its offering. Is it a little bit, you know, on a side of this is now happening, this is now new, and like we are not too sure, like if we want to care about this 3 years from now? Maybe a little, like, which is why I feel like even when we were initially sitting with Eric, and the conversation from the get-go was about building something that won't change, or building something that can last. Or we had discussions that was like, this chair is going to last you 10 years. You have you know, my warranty is going to go on forever, but what we can do down the road is swap out the seats, or change, you know, like do things in the space that we can kind of uplift it and bring it to a different level without it changing. Like, it was constantly this idea that it should be there to last. And I think that's a little bit what I'm maybe craving a little here. Like, it's institutions that we think about from back home that you know, that have been there for forever, that you always go to, that here, we have a couple too. But the scene is so intense that you kind of are missing that part.
Mm-hmm. There's a great energy in Los Angeles. I think there's the opportunity to create something unique, and you find like-minded individuals who are driven as well and are eager to actually concretely make the steps to make it happen. So it's not like just an idea somewhere. There's people here actually who can make things And that's like, it's super important. There's amazing restaurants. I'm always drawn to the ones who have their own voice and have created something that's really unique and feels cohesive from start to finish. And that's like, there's so many examples of those here. So it's great to be open in the city, I think.
And you've done that certainly with Auburn, so yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. So questions from any of you? Yes.
How much have you been influenced by Japanese culture?
By Japanese culture. I think a lot in the fact that I have more experience with French cooking and time in France. But even between France and Japan, there's a lot of similarities from a focus aspect and a detailed orientation, plus, in a simple term, like a refinement orientation, I would think. Japan, I've been 2, 3 to 4 times. Have loved every trip there. It's such a unique culture. I'm really intrigued by the way the culture as a whole looks at how to perfect things and is willing to spend time, whether that's years or generations, to figure out how to maintain a sense of integrity of whatever that is they're working with, but also to bring their own unique touch to it, right? So it's a very old, unique culture driven by simplicity and execution. So for me, it ties a lot into the design. There are, I think, Japanese moments. Some of that in curating views. We closed in all the windows along Melrose to sort of make it a more subtle space, but we didn't want it to feel blocked in, so we left a 2-foot window up near the top, so we could still see greenery poking through. And part of that curating those views, I feel like there's a lot of similarities to how Japanese design is, and most people are approaching that. From a food perspective, we look a lot to how we build sauces between French technique and Japanese technique. So there's a lot of land and sea components. We look for a lot of depth using seaweed, using infusions and broths, and using kind of very clear, edited ways to approach a flavor profile. And it ties it right back to the materiality and the substantialness, and how do you make these integrations feel important and substantial, but in simple gestures where those materials still maintain their inherent properties. So if we're doing that well, we need fat, we need substance. We approach sauces and food like you're tasting wine, so it's how it evolves. On the palate, and like the longevity and law of diminishing returns when you're looking at how big to make a portion. But so in Japan, again, a lot of seaweed, a lot of umami, a lot of depth, but a lot of clarity. And I think that's kind of the juggle we're trying to make.
Great.
Yeah.
Yes.
So having been to your restaurant a couple of times, I'm struck in this conversation by 2 things. One, everything that you've done and all the care that you've put into things, experiencing it is that it's a serene backdrop for wherever the customer is in their life. So one time we were there was a mother and her 12-year-old child who evidently he was a developing gourmand, and she was in one part of the restaurant teaching him. And then there were other people who were coming in and just having fun, and there were other people who were really experiencing the space. And so I think it's interesting because it reminds me of the Getty, in the sense that it's a restaurant that, depending on when you're there, who you're there with, the time of the year you're there, you can have a totally different experience. And yet the experience is facilitated by everything that you do. So that really resonates for me hearing you talk, because you wanted it to be that. And that's really a story.
Well, that's the key, yeah. I mean, it's the customers are making the experience, right? So everything we do is for the customers who are in there. It's not self-serving. And so we try and make a lot of compromises that are difficult decisions, but that put the customer perspective first. So whether that's choice making, or like you're saying, being able to adapt. The way we train the staff and the way we look at knowledge and how we convey it is very light touch, because I don't want people to feel bombarded with information. It's not theater. It's not like talking for the sake of talking. And a lot of people just want to come have a good meal and eat delicious food and spend time with whoever they're with. Because in essence, that's what it is, right? it's the community, and it's the 4 people at the table, or the 2 people at the table, it's friends, it's family. There's so many different factors for why people go out that the individuals who want to know more, we always wanted to be able to give them more information. Who made something, why it's made. If you look at the space, there's a lot of details that go unnoticed unless you're digging. And I think, so we can appease people who are digging and want more information, but again, I think a lot of times it can become too heavy, and we wanted to make it light touch.
I have a question for you though. There's a certain choreography that goes on amongst your team. Is that intentional? Do you train them in movement? Because they truly are choreographed. I don't know if you intended that, but the way they interact and move through the space and glide and flow with each other looks as if they've been taking yoga.
It's intentional.
It feels very intentional.
It comes because we try and find like-minded individuals who want to be a part of the restaurant, right? So that's the first key. Whether they have like a ton of fine dining experience is kind of irregardless. If they're good people, they're intelligent and they want to learn and they want to work, and they're humble and they have humility, they are generous, and they're truly there to be hospitable and to build something, is the key. The second is we try and give them the liberty to be who they are within a certain spectrum, because it's important. And it goes to like our uniforms. We developed a uniform palette that is, this is kind of a lookbook of how we would like you to look.
Of the uniforms?
They're very simple.
Is it kind of like clothes?
No, it won't. No. The idea is that we pick a color palette, and for us in the front is dark blue. It's dark blue buttons.
Okay.
But I want people to therefore have choices around how they deal with it. So if it's a skirt that's short or long, if it's a pantsuit, if it's a gentleman in wavy long pants, it doesn't matter to me, because it feels that they're part of the team. It's a non-uniform uniform, because it's important that people have they take ownership of their decision making when they wake up. They feel better about themselves. We're not telling them where to go shop. It's just, there feels like there's a cohesion, but there's also like valuing the individuality of the people on the team. And so, which was, I don't know. Not a lot of people do that. It was just an idea, like how can we value our team? Restaurant business here, outside of being very fun, it's very competitive. And maintaining staff is like the key. So outside of delicious food, elevated service, and beautiful design, which are like the 3 pillars of this whole thing, is the staff who need to be bought into the restaurant, who want to work, who the rest of the staff can take advantage of their acquired experience. They can have a voice. They should bring something that betters the team as a whole. So we wanted to build a restaurant that has people who want to work there, and that's the key to the sustainability.
If I can add to this, how awesome this man is. One of the first things that we were like, this is a fantastic space. The fact that this is LA, it has wonderful weather, and yet every time we try to go eat somewhere nice, you sit in an air-conditioned environment, which causes me a headache and a backache. It doesn't matter. I was like, oh my God, finally, he's okay with the fact that there's gonna be a cooler night, that there's gonna have to be a little adjustments to it. So I think that was awesome. But he came and was like, who's gonna be here in this space the most are my people. So how about we open up the kitchen and make sure that all those doors are openable, so that during the day, when these guys are spending in 12 plus hours, they get the fresh air and they get the natural lights. They get solid oak shelving inside his fine dining high-end kitchen, so that their touch and feel of what they're doing is to the point. So every time I come to Auburn, I love people that work there. We're good friends by now, but everybody loves it, it's without a question. They all love to be in the way the whole thing is set up. And I think,
but the
Eric
acoustics also have a huge impact, because when you go to so many restaurants, you can't have a real relaxed conversation with a regular voice, or we're also bombarded and we're exhausted when we go out. That's the reality of it. So you have this music blaring, which is competing with the elements, it's competing with the food, it's competing with the conversation. So you guys also created an amazing acoustic. Imagine working in a space with music blaring all day long. It's exhausting.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, all these elements we were able to control. So, I mean, from my perspective, it was the perfect opportunity. It's a great opportunity. It's like unheard of to be able to like think about all these small little things and actually have the ability to make good decisions and try and build something.
Last question.
I heard about the interaction as far as the designs of the restaurant was concerned, and I'm kind of fascinated. I particularly like the ceramics, the dinnerware. What was it like creating that and figuring out what he liked and didn't like and the interaction that took place?
Well, Delphine had already, I mean, she was a substantial and already had a beautiful collection. I feel fortunate to have found Delphine, that we had come across some imagery and, you know, serendipitously, I think there was a wabi-sabi sale that I passed by, for real.
That we all waited in line for.
And as we were coming, John and Masha were showing up in the Jeep, and I had my mom with me. We just knew that the material and the substantialness of it was like the perfect fit. And I think all of that just tied into trying to be real about materials. And I mean, your stuff there's a weight to it. There's a material, there's a touch point, things that you have to interact with, you're forced to interact with. That was super unique. So it was like kid in a candy shop. I mean, you go in and see the studio and it was like, yes, we could do that, we could do that. And I didn't know what we were gonna cook with it. I just knew we were gonna do, like, I needed like 15 different plates, and we needed a lot of kind of medium-sized plates, and I was fortunate Delphine would bring back this vinyl that you had done before, because for me it was like reminiscent of profiles that I'd worked with other like French Limoges, Bernardaud stuff. But this was like produced by someone who we could have a conversation with, who was here in LA, who has like a unique voice and a very identifiable craft and end product. For me, it was like, I just got to choose whatever. It was cool.
But one of the things was, my process is so personal to me, and I'm such an odd bird, I guess. They say, I don't know what the expression is, it has to come from within. And I find that there's a lot of resistance and sabotage and panic when I have to create for somebody else. So I created for myself, and this is what you get to choose. So he picked within what I felt comfortable doing. Because the process of making is very personal to me, and the challenges are personal to Humble Ceramics. And so I've tried to create for other chefs, and it's been too challenging. And then if I promise something and I can't deliver, I just can't. It's just not, you know. So I wanted him to pick, okay, this is what we can do, this is what we do, see if anything resonates. And he was inspired, and he picked, you know, I mean, we do offer different finishes and different clay bodies, different colors, but you have a very minimalist palette. So, yeah.
So it inspired you to be yourself.
Allowed you to buy yourself.
Well, yeah, I
You
mean,
were doing what you did. I was fortunate
I'm
just to be able to
inspired by
put these
chefs.
artists together.
I'm inspired by chefs. Chefs move me so profoundly, and I'm gonna cry.
Well, and we forgot to mention to the audience that you started in restaurants, so you come to the ceramics from that background.
Well, I mean, I worked a year and a half for Wolfgang Puck at the original Spago, and then I went maybe 3 days at Pasadena. That's how long I lasted. No, but one of the reasons why I have so much respect for chefs is so they're at the center, right? And so they're connected to the ground, the soil, the farmers, the land. But they're also they're taking these elements, they're creating art out of it, and then they're connected to design and art and architecture, and they have vision. And so I love that continuum. And we're just in the middle of it. We're just a small part of their vision. But for me, God is the ultimate artist, right? And when you take a flower, when you take a vegetable, when you take a fruit, and then you reinvent it, and you make food from it, it's so symbolic. I also know, I'm falling forward. I also know what it takes to be a chef. It's a hard, hard life. And so chefs move me. They just move me because I know what it takes. I have great respect for anyone who opens a restaurant and who works in the hospitality industry. I think to be a chef is to give love. It's about passion. It's about integrity. It's about wanting to express and share and give and nourish. And I love that cycle. I love that cycle. And that's another thing I love about Los Angeles is the diversity and the ingredients that we have access to. It's incredible. And I mean, and all the microclimates that we have access to and the different, I mean, it's just, you know.
Thank you. I think we're all moved by what all of you do. So thank you all so much for this discussion tonight.